I guess I've always got things to say. It's bad, but it's a good question. Probably because you're at Texas Tech, great school, by the way. That when we look at a lot of the papers in the applied, economics realm, the focus has been on the willingness to pay, like the preference part of it. But really, I think we've not paid as much attention as we should to the beliefs part of it, because at least, conventional economic theory would suggest that's the thing that can change. We normally think about preferences as being fairly, relatively stable, whereas beliefs are the things that respond to information and other factors. And so I think thinking about methods of eliciting beliefs, and there's a big literature on that in experimental economics, but probably not so much in the applied, say applied to food, environment. I think we could do a lot more work thinking about how do we elicit beliefs? How are those beliefs affected by information, by social cues, other things like that. And so, I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space to really explore and push boundaries. And there's a lot of behavioral economic factors there too. We have these conventional Bayesian models of belief updating, and I think we have a lot of evidence those don't always work very well. And so I think that if you're just looking for like behavioral theories of why people do what they do, I think we need better theories of why and how people update beliefs the way they do. So just to give you an example, sometimes kind of relates to reactants, but sometimes let's say you give people information that this thing is good for you. There will be some people that update their belief in the opposite direction, like that just there's like no way Bayesian updating can explain that. And so like, right, kids. Yeah, I've got my 17-year-old son in the back there. Yeah, so probably would be an example of that. So anyway, I think there's a lot of fruitful ground in that space to play in. So I would be very happy to see more of that kind of research.
So my point on beliefs would be that if you want to measure something like beliefs or perception or attitudes, to make sure you find validated scales, like good instruments, so that you can really argue why is what you are measuring really a belief. And no one can say like, well, you asked this question, but I don't think you measured that. We talked about that, like what is perception compared to attitudes, right? So really go into the literature, find the strong theories that say this is the definition of an attitude and this is a validated instrument to measure that. That would be my point here.
Yeah, so Jayson basically talked a lot about theory in this regard, and Carola mentioned the importance of eliciting those beliefs in the way they should be elicited. Another area could be the way you can model beliefs, right, in the context of the models we have seen during those past days. So how would you model beliefs in a discrete choice model? Those poses a number of challenges for the researchers, and I think that there is not much out there, and this could be an area of future research direction.
I think you're exactly right. So my thoughts on this area are very colored by my own work on risk and risk behavior. Beliefs and preferences are confounded in the way we typically go about researching this. We assume it's the one or the other, and we're just observing the behavior and forcing onto our individual that we're observing that this is either preference or this is belief. And pulling those apart, I'd say you're asking for best practices when we don't have any practices. We need to innovate and create new tools to be able to do this. And starting with some of the psychometric measures is probably a good idea, but I think there's a whole lot of interesting work that could be done in this.
And I think this also goes to the point when we talked about how do you find your niche, right? How can you write the next paper that's not just on organic, willingness to pay for organic tomatoes, innovating that, right? Finding a way to say, like, if there is no scale, could you build one? Could you construct one, right? And then if you do that, I would, for example, suggest look at the marketing literature, because they are very thorough. When you see, like, they start with probably 100 items and they test and retest until they have the 10 that build the validated scale. So what I would always advise against is to randomly pick 10 and then say, this is my scale. That's very risky, because then you don't really know what you are actually measuring. Or if you're using a validated instrument and it has 30 items and you feel like that's too much, and then you just pick 10, that is not okay. So then you're, again, you don't know what you are measuring. You always measure something, you just don't know anymore what you're measuring.
Another, I think, fruitful area for research, and I've probably grappled with it a lot in my career, not ever come to useful resolution, which is, what do you do when you think people's beliefs are wrong relative to the scientific literature? So we talked about, let's just take like a non-controversial example, probably like smoking causes cancer, but there may be some people out there that think, no, it doesn't. Like, what do you do with that in terms of welfare analysis, policy analysis? I know David has written on sort of, how do you think about welfare economics when people have behavioral biases? This is sort of like in that same genre of question. And I don't think we have good answers to that. At least I haven't read one or haven't come up with one that I felt really good about. But I think that's, that certainly would fit in organic, it would fit in GMOs, it fits in a lot of the things I've worked on where, we have science that says one thing, we have people that believe something else. What do we do? Like, how do we think about policy? How do we think about welfare in that kind of world?